that the member states who are able to purchase at a higher price could do that and support the ones who cannot purchase at a higher price. It would require a conversation about how to manage, external reference pricing and many other things. So that we can't do on our own, but we're committed to have a discussion on that. And I think these are the steps that we need to take to seize the opportunity now and try and fix as many things as we can now in a moment where it's a sort of the post-tsunami moment where we want to clean everything up. But let's not put it all back to how it was before, because we don't have the same resources we had before, but we also have an opportunity to paint a much nicer picture and a more effective picture for patients at the end of the day. So I really, I'm excited. It's a big, daunting challenge, but it's great that, meetings like this and committees like this one take the time to really bring experts together and stakeholders and discuss what's possible, what's desired, what's needed, and make progress. So thank you.
Sorry, I will repeat. Since we are talking about legislation, we have a second co-chair of the Interest Group on Access in the European Parliament, who is online. And as far as I understood, he would be in a hurry for another meeting. Mr. Sokol is online. Mr. Sokol, do you think that the current proposal or legislative packages and initiatives is meeting the expectations of the society and the industry and the science? At the end, is it? Do you think it's enough to achieve what we all want to achieve: better access and healthier European citizens?
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me and see me. So I think it is very important that we actually discuss what European Union concretely can do to facilitate access to healthcare. And I think even though healthcare is primarily a national competence, as we all know, European Union can do a lot. From its position of actually supporting and coordinating what member states are doing, and in that sense, I'm really glad that we are discussing this kind of topics in a timely manner. Traditionally, healthcare has been a marginal issue within the European Union. I have to say that, and in many instances, this division of competences was used as an excuse not to do a lot. What we've done in the past was usually ad hoc responses to certain problems which emerged. And in this way, we also developed the pharmaceutical legislation. We developed EMA. We developed Cross-Border Healthcare Directive, Transparency Directive, and other pieces of EU legislation. But what I believe is that we need a more systematic approach, and we have to see how to bind and connect all of these pieces of EU legislation together. What I think is important now is that we actually have a momentum, but this momentum is kind of going fast, of actually having healthcare as one of the most important topics in the EU. And I think two most important developments have influenced that fact. One is the COVID-19, obviously, which has put healthcare in the focus of EU institutions and EU legislation, but also the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, which was the EPP initiative, even since the start of the EU 2019 election campaign, we as the strongest political group in the parliament made this as our flagship project for this mandate, and I'm glad that Europe's Beating Cancer Plan has materialized, that it was enacted by European Commission, and we also now have the BECA committee, the Special Committee on Beating Cancers report on the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, which contains a number of suggestions and proposals on how to actually change and improve on the plan itself. And within this package is also the whole idea of the European Health Union. So this kind of change of political atmosphere, this shift on health, putting the focus on healthcare has actually created the situation that we have now. We have this concept of European Health Union, where the revision of pharmaceutical legislation is one of the key concerns. When we speak about the revision of pharma legislation, I would like to mention some principles which I think are important. First, I think crucial is access. So how to facilitate access to pharmaceuticals in a way which is in line with the principle of equity, so that everyone in the European Union actually has access to best possible pharmaceuticals which exist. So I think this should be the starting point. So to have equal access for all EU citizens under the same conditions to pharmaceuticals everywhere in the EU. Of course, it is very hard to do that because we have different national reimbursement systems, and we know that reimbursement of pharmaceuticals and treatments in general is definitely a national competence. But I think that we can really do a lot to improve the situation when compared to what we have now. So the first principle here, I think this should be the starting point. So to facilitate equal access to pharmaceuticals to everybody in the EU. How to do that? I think first we need to invest in innovation. So strengthening innovation, investing into innovation is crucial. Not just the innovation which is transferred into concrete patents, etc., but also to work with fundamental research, because fundamental research needs to be financed from the public purse. Because this is something which is not commercially viable in itself, and this is why we have a Horizon program, which I think is important. I'm glad that healthcare has gained much more focus and has become much more of a priority within the Horizon program. So we have the beating cancer as one of the priority missions of the Horizon program. And I think this is very important that EU funds and invest into fundamental research. I think that is very important. Second, when we speak about implemented research and commercialized research, I think and investing into concrete innovation, into concrete innovation, which are then patented and commercialized, it is crucial to speak with the industry as partners. I'm mentioning here this as something very important because in many cases in the parliament we hear this kind of negative attitude towards the pharmaceutical industry, against the big pharma and all that from some political groups. But I think this is a wrong approach. I think that we have to engage with the industry. We have to discuss with the industry. I'm glad that I'm also collaborating closely with the industry. I'm glad that we have with these kinds of meetings as we have today, because engagement with the industry is crucial. Because without the industry, there will be no innovation, there will be no new products, no new patents, no new technologies which we can then fund, reimburse, and all that. So we need to have industry, we need to be partners with them, and not to be in this kind of a confronting mode with the industry, which some political groups in the parliament are proposing. Also, what is a big part of that is the question of IP rights. So I believe that protection of IP rights is crucial if we want to provide a framework, if we want to provide an ecosystem, and if we want to provide incentives for the industry to invest into new research and innovation. That is crucial. So without the protection of IP rights, without the protection of intellectual property of patents and everything else connected with this, I believe that there is no way that we can remain competitive in this, let's say, I wouldn't say fight, but in this competition with other parts of the world like the US, China, and India, etc. And we've seen through the pandemic how important it is to maintain at least part of strategic production capacities on European territory. So we need to engage with the industry. We need to be partners with them. We need to maintain the framework of protection of IP rights and see what kind of additional incentives we can produce for the industry so that they actually strengthen their investments into research and innovation. I think in that sense, orphan drugs regulation is crucial. The revision of orphan drugs regulation is crucial. It's very important because it provides incentives for investments into innovation in orphan drugs, and we have to maintain this logic and this system. Of course, see how to improve that, but definitely maintain the logic and principles behind the systems that we already have, because it has actually yielded concrete results. So we need to have this kind of a framework which provides incentives for the industry to invest into expensive and advanced medicines, especially for rare diseases, so into orphan drugs. And this is something which we definitely will have to maintain in the revision of this legislation. Also, I believe what has already been mentioned by FPA is the fact that we need to see what can be facilitated, which bureaucratic procedures can be made simpler, which things are not necessary, of course, without jeopardizing safety. So we have to see what are all those things which are bureaucratic, which are not necessary, which can be taken out of the procedure or made simpler or fastened, but of course without jeopardizing the safety and the scientific evaluation of concrete pharmaceuticals. We've seen with the vaccines that this can be done, that when there is a big public pressure, when there is political will to actually facilitate introduction of new medical technologies, that a lot of things can be reduced, a lot of things can be fastened, a lot of things can be made simpler. And I think this logic should be also used when discussing the next pieces of pharmaceutical legislation and the procedure, not just for vaccines in this specific circumstances, but also for the whole procedure and the whole framework of introducing new pharmaceuticals in general. I definitely fully support what has been said in that regard. I think we have to work obviously with the industry on that. I'm sorry that we didn't make use of the HTA regulation in a better way. I think this was one of the lost opportunities to actually have a better framework of introduction of new pharmaceuticals into the market, into national systems. Because the original idea of the HTA regulation was to instead of having one health technology assessment, one set of instead of having 27 different clinical assessments of new medical technologies, to have only one on the European level. And this was in the original Commission proposal. Unfortunately, after the very lengthy negotiations with the Council, this was changed. And now instead of having one stop shop, instead of 27, we have the 28. So we have the new procedure of health technology assessment and joint clinical assessments on European level, but without a clear legal duty of member states to actually implement what has been decided on European level. And there is a big chance, big possibility that instead of having this one procedure replacing the HTAs on national level, that we will have a new additional procedure, so a new procedure in addition to the 27 national ones. So this is something which I think is not optimal. I'm sorry that we didn't use this chance to actually simplify the procedure of conducting health technology assessment on European level. And I hope this will not be the case in the revision of other pieces of pharmaceutical legislation. So we really need simplification. We really need to remove all of the things which are obstacles to introduction of new pharmaceuticals. And I hope that we will use this possibility. And just one last point, and then I finish. When I mentioned the importance of equity, one initiative that has been born, let's say, in the European Parliament is the idea of joint procurement. Of course, not of all pharmaceuticals, not of all medicines, but of those most advanced ones, most expensive ones. The whole idea of having this kind of joint procurement with using the similar logic as with COVID-19 vaccines is, instead of having 27 member states negotiating individually with the industry about pharmaceuticals for rare diseases, especially expensive pharmaceuticals, to have only one European procedure, to have European Union negotiating as a whole, and in that way using this possibility to actually have a level playing field so that all member states can have access to pharmaceuticals under the same conditions and in the same time. I think this is something very important. I think that we will be working on this, and of course, but we have to engage with the industry and see what will be the best way, how to streamline and organize this kind of joint procurement, so that we don't that the final result is not counter-effective. So thank you very much again for this. I think we have a lot of things to do. We have a lot of possibilities to act on European level, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And we'll definitely be working strongly on the new developments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope you can stay for the last panelist intervention right now, because we at the end are the patient access partnership, and this partnership is led by patients and would continue being led by patients. This was actually in the heart, in the core of our existence 7-8 years ago when PACT was established, to have everyone around the table as equal partner. And the industry was one of the partners approached by us. We've been very hardly criticized throughout the years for this cooperation, but I strongly believe that all partners need to be around the table when we are trying to solve an issue rather than putting someone aside. But when talking about partners, it's very important also to remind everyone, the audience and the distinguished speakers here, that we have agreement and definition on access in Europe. For first time, we have common understanding what is access, and it's a complex of 5 A's. It's about availability, but also about how adequate are products and services, how accessible are they physically, and how affordable they are. And the last A is the appropriateness. So I would like to introduce Ms. Kaisa Immonen. She's the Policy Director of the European Patients Forum, with some comments whether the current proposal and legislations and initiatives are sufficient to meet these 5 A's of access, which were verified through the patients community and through different stakeholders within PACT as definition of access. Kaisa, please. Can we, Kaisa, if you hear us, because we can't hear you. Okay, until we are waiting, probably there's a technical issue, but or your microphone is not on. Meanwhile, we will continue here with questions and the conversation about the 5 A's. Bogi, you heard everything that our speakers had to share with us. Do you think that the 5 A's of access are properly addressed, and do we need a 6A maybe?
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think we heard some very, very interesting things. And if you ask me if the 5 A's are properly addressed, I think we need to probably think about what does properly mean. Because I will go back to what Natalie also mentioned, that we are, and this is a focus we very much have, that we have a lot of focus on innovation, but not on the readiness on the society to actually implement and use it. And in order to activate the A's, it's not just about the innovation, it's about the application. Our challenge is actually not the innovation. If you had the assembly yesterday, you also showed the numbers that we work with. European Union is doing well in innovation, is doing well in also granting access to funding to innovate in different ways, but the application is not good. And there I would also say, we work quite a lot in Latin America, and one of my good friends in Latin America, Augusto Galán, a former Colombian health minister, he usually says that if you don't have a direction, every route you take is beautiful. And I might think that that is one of the challenges we have. We are quite clear in Europe that we don't want to be like some other parts of the world, but it's not really clear what we want to be. And I do think that the opportunities are vast, but the direction needs to be agreed on. And in order to apply to this, so for instance, why should we have approval processes for all 27 countries? So I'm quite active in the European Health Union movement. I think it's a right idea, but it's not just to speed up access. It's also, if we want to realize personalized health, it needs cross-border data sharing. If we want to work with genomics on a precision medicine on for instance, very, very specific mutations in cancer, it needs sharing and experience across countries. If we need learning health systems so we can optimize and get away with 30% of waste that we see in most health systems, we need to share and learn across the countries. So it's a much broader picture, and I think those needs to come in order to address your 5 A's in that part. And I just would like to emphasize that the challenge is not technology or concepts. We always need to develop and push them as hard as possible, but we are not focusing enough on the application, so the implementation and getting from pilot to running.
Echoing what you just said, I live in a country which is considered to be one of the most difficult in terms of access to innovation. But in this country, we had a very paradoxical example during the COVID. And still being so difficult in access, and patients really demanding, and doctors and the society demanding lots. During the COVID, we had the vaccines assured by the innovators, the pharmaceutical industry. We had also our government introducing and providing the vaccines in the country on time. But the results are really bad at the end, because everyone was doing his job rightly, but the patients were not vaccinated. And the reasons for that are still to be analyzed, but we are with one of the lowest level of vaccination in Europe, despite the free vaccines, despite all the efforts of everyone. So my question is, echoing what you just said, that the implementation is different. And this is probably to Mr. Kovachev a question, and to Ms. Natalie Moll, unless we have already Kaisa in the conversation, if she's able to join this conversation. But obviously, providing products, innovations, is simply not enough, and we will see in the future more and more products coming with other part of the solution rather than simply being a chemical. We are going to see services together with products. We're going to see technologies together with products going hand in hand. And if we are not ready today providing traditional products in a sufficient way that the Bulgarians, and not only the Bulgarians, everyone would benefit of the innovation and advancement, how we make sure that the tomorrow's products, which are going to be even more sophisticated, are going to be properly addressed and reach those who need it. What do you think about the Bulgarian situation, Andrei? Being a member of the European Parliament from Bulgaria as well.
As you know, we have discussed a lot about this access to healthcare and how to measure at the beginning. Then we had this pilot project. As you just mentioned, now we have a definition what it means access. And in some aspects, access for example, in Bulgaria is better than in Belgium. In Belgium, if you like to have a specialist visit to a specialist, you need indeed to a dermatologist, for example, need 1 to 2 months to have one appointment. And this is really a big problem. In other countries, like in Bulgaria, you can have it tomorrow or in the same day. But if we talk about introduction to innovative treatments, and treatment is not only medical, pharmaceutical, but also like package treatment, medical devices, etc., then we are lacking behind. In general, we need to speed up. It was very clearly shown during the pandemic that this traditional waiting for a long time from the laboratory to the market may be fasten. And again, I will go to cancer, because this is something which is very close to all of us. Almost everybody have in the family or in the relatives, friends, cases of cancer. And we have so good news sometimes, like 1 month ago with this small trial in the United States that could treat efficiently all of the participants with 100% successful rate of this. I think that was rectal cancer. And I hope that we can somehow contribute to speed up the good, innovative treatment discoveries or possibilities worldwide to become more faster available to the patients which are in desperate need for this treatment and not for the classical, sometimes old-fashioned, very endangering their quality of life treatments which are available. Thank you.
Natalie, do you have comment on this challenge?
Yeah, so this is one of the main challenges we've been looking at, of course, I think all of us. And because it's just not acceptable that different patients have waiting times in different countries and sometimes never have access to the medicines. And you might know FPIP publishes every year something called the weight indicator, which when I joined, I wasn't sure what exactly and how that was written, but it's how long patients have to wait for medicines in different countries. And we saw, year upon year, in fact, discrepancies increasing, not reducing. And that's why over the last 2 years, we produced the root causes report that goes together with weight to identify why, so that we can start fixing the why instead of just, complaining about the what and finger pointing at each other. And if I look at the 10 reasons, maybe it's helpful that I bring them up because I mentioned in my previous intervention that we made commitments on the areas that we can fix, if you like, or try to fix. But there are 10 root causes that we identified. The first part is the time to authorization. So, there are delays in the speed of the regulatory process. In Europe, it takes about twice as long as in the US to get a product approved at European level. So we're already on more than 400 days versus 200 days. So that's nearly more than a year just to get the product approved. Then it's always an approval. There are ways of getting medicines to patients before marketing authorizations. And some countries have these accelerated pathways, compassionate use, many different ways of getting the medicines to patients, but some don't. And I think there is a way of looking into that in a better way and making sure that companies can use these pathways if possible. The second area, you won't be surprised, is pricing and reimbursement processes. When does the process start in a country? It might take longer. They might require more data. And does the country stick to the timeline? There's supposed to be 180 days. Does that work? Does that not work? So any delays there will mean delays in the final result. And then the value assessment process. So MEP Sokol mentioned the HTA regulation. This will be so important that it is really applied once. So at least the scientific assessment part of HTA will be done once at European level using one set of experts and one set of resources, and not that each member state says, well, yeah, that's nice, but I'm going to ask for these other 5 things that the company didn't think about when it started its process. So then the company has to go off and do more research. And research is not a few months. If you're doing clinical trials, it takes years. So I think the value assessment process, there's the scientific assessment process, the HTA. We have an opportunity to get it right, to get it done faster for patients. And then on the value assessment, there's often misalignment on evidence requirements or on value and price between companies, differentiation. So that can cause a lot of delays. And then, and you mentioned it as well in your introduction, the health system readiness. Is the health system able to welcome the innovation? And you mentioned, we're not talking about chemicals very often. CAR T therapies, hospitals need to be able to do that. They need to be able to transform, a patient's cells and DNA and give that back to the patient. I mean, there's a level of technology, a level of training of staff that has to be really focused on if we want to welcome this new technology into the system. And then also combination products. So the famous combination products, you need a diagnosis of something so that you can actually give the personalized medicine that it makes sense. But if the diagnostic is not approved because it's approved nationally and the therapy is approved, you can't use the therapy. It's there, but you can't use it. So there are so many things. And the last number 10 would be, if there's a regional approval. So sometimes you have the national, then you have the regional approval. And so you have these multiple decision making processes where sometimes the approval is even at a hospital level. This is not one country. We often compare ourselves to the US. The US is one country, one language, one system. I think we need to be realistic that we are a collection of countries. We have our challenges. We have different purchasing powers depending on the different countries, also different epidemiological situations, different needs for medicines. But we need to act in solidarity and find solutions to the problems, because there is no time. Patients have no time. We can discuss this. We can, this is only a 1 hour roundtable. That's pretty good. But patients are waiting. And I think this moment post-COVID, with the revision of legislation, with the pharma strategy, everybody pointing in the same direction, if we don't seize this moment for the next 20 years, I think we'll be really doing a disfavor to patients.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we all are trying to do our job rightly, but if the patients at the end don't survive, we have not done enough. The same as the vaccines in Bulgaria. If they don't reach the patients, obviously somebody has not done enough. So it doesn't go to the patients. How we meet this challenge, and obviously in the future, we are going to have more and more challenges coming from different countries, and I wouldn't agree as much with you about the differences and the learnings we can have from the United States. Sorry, somebody, please keep your mics down. Thank you. But there's something that we can learn from the Americans, and it is how to make federation in the right way. And so it doesn't really make any member state angry. So nobody is United States. It's quite easy with their very short constitution. Obviously, they don't need this huge legislation behind. It simply works. What really works there, and how can we transfer this into the European context, if anything is transferable? There are, again, many member states, all of them are independent. Healthcare is not federal responsibility, but at the end, they have, for example, excellence models that they implement all over, quality of services, which is guaranteed to patients in different states. How do the Americans do that if they're very similar to Europeans in terms of many different member states and everyone responsible for their own healthcare system? Are you aware, Bogi, or someone else from the speakers here?
Well, I can try to respond to what I know. I'm not sure I know all the dynamics. I definitely think there are some things to learn from in US, but there are also some things to learn not to do. And I think that's always important when you look for inspirations. So while you have some of the best access, best cares in the world in the US, you will also have a huge part of the population who has no access at all, practically. So that's also a thing to take into it. So what I was trying to allude to before is what I'm thinking is missing in the European context, which you are trying in really pushing much. And you said it in the beginning. You took a stand to work with the commercial side, even if you're criticized. I really think that there's a need for redefinition of what does private-public partnership mean, maybe with an extra P with the people and an extra one where the patients are also. But the point is that in Europe, private-public partnership has been to solve a tender. It's not a partnership where you really go in and work together. And I think there is a different approach to that sometimes in a US context, not always, but sometimes. And then, of course, there is more flexibility because there was a deregulation of a lot of things. Some of it is good, but we really need to learn about that not all of it is actually good for most people. And I think that's where we need to go. But I think where we have the challenge is how can we use data better? So we have this huge focus on the European digital health data space, which is a good process, but it's still fragmented into that data needs to be protected for the sake of data. Data needs to be anonymized, so it cannot be abused in different ways. But patients are not anonymous subjects; they are persons that we need to help. And the working with data is something that has worked better in the US in different ways.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree for the American system. At the same time, obviously, they do something very simple but effective to make member states follow principles and guidelines. And probably the first thing is to define what is proper healthcare.
Yes, sorry, but what I mean, one of the things what Obama did was to say interoperability. There's a staircase of 10 years. Okay, in 3 years, all companies, you have to be interoperable on this. In 6 years or whatever it was, it needs to be this. So they do these directions on standards and expectations that not tomorrow, but in some years, you will not get reimbursed or you will not get licenses if you don't follow these things.
Or what's even more pragmatic and working quite well there, everyone is free to do whatever they want in healthcare because it's independent and it's competence of the member states, not the federal government. But if they want to have access, for example, to federal money for projects, etc., they need to follow some rules and directions by the federal government and by the experts involved and citizens involved into defining what's a healthcare system that they need and the science requires currently. Are we there yet in Europe? And how we get there to have at least common understanding, like in the cancer plan, we have plan, but we still are missing kind of European agreement on what is standard of care, for example, and how the standard of care would go to citizens everywhere in Europe, not only those who are privileged to live in big city or a more wealthier country. So this question is to everyone. Probably we'll start with Andrei. Are we there yet to talk about health union, but on practical terms, this to be real union and having real impact on patients everywhere?
What I can say, I mean, we talk about many kind of union, banking union, defense union, health union, social union. We are, I think, on none of them there. This is very simple that we are not there, and very, very clear that we are not there. But there are efforts on a European level, here on the legislative level in the European Parliament, and on the national level to make steps to this direction that all citizens, despite if they're in the big city, in the capital, in the province, need to have equal access to healthcare. This is our goal. We are not there, but the health union is the, if you like, vision. I don't like the word vision because many people are saying if you have visions, then you need to go to doctor. But to have at least this goal to facilitate the accessibility of healthcare for all. Thank you.
Any interventions from the other speakers here, how we get there and how we make sure that we define at least what is proper healthcare, what is adequate services, and are we going to agree on something like that in the near future on European level? And is the cancer plan actually a good example of this?
Yeah, I think that, you know, during COVID, we collaborated in such an incredible way. You know, I don't know about other parts of the world because we were too busy trying to get medicines across borders here when all the borders shut down. I don't know if you remember, we used to have one call a week just to work out what it is that we needed. Clinical trials were being interrupted, people couldn't go. And, you know, these weekly calls with the commissioners, the medicines agency, the ECDC, every single stakeholder, really very concrete, down to earth. These are the problems, finding solutions was impressive. And of course, we're not going to be able to work like that in every moment of our lives because we basically had to work day and night. But the point is, we learned that each of us has something very concrete to bring to the table, and that by discussing and collaborating, we can find solutions much faster than when we just stick in our little corner and try to, based on our knowledge, find solutions. So I would hate for the last 2.5 years not to, because 2.5 years is a long time to collaborate. You know, it's not just like we met at a meeting and we had a great meeting. We spent 2.5 years depending on each other to help patients. So I really hope that we can build on that. And as you said, there's a moment at European level that we've never had before, a pharma strategy, a review of legislation, national healthcare systems that need to be rebuilt. What better time than now to get it right? So.
Yeah, if I can. So I think I agree. We have seen a lot of different things in the last 2.5 years, and also collaboration we did not expect. But it was also a refocus on the importance of public health, which we are beginning to lose again now. And if we look at what is possible with concepts and technology today, it's a merger of public health and personalized health. It's not one or the other, and it's not one silo and the other silo, and then you work with them. It's a combination. That possibility is very clear in the cancer care, because cancer care is about prevention. Some of it is avoidable. It's about secondary prevention once you have it. It's about fast access when you are there, when you have diagnosis, so fast diagnosis and fast intervention on it and the follow-up. But it's also an area where you would combine traditional treatment with add-ons, digital add-ons in different ways. But it's probably also where we need to re-question ourselves, is the place of health a hospital? Is the time where we move health service to where the person is and not the person to where the health service is? A part of it still needs to be in the hospital, so the specialized part, but most of the other things, people are better off not coming to the hospital. And we have shown with COVID that digitally this is possible, but do we have the guts really to go forward and take this change in it? And this is where I'm still, so I see the European focus on health as a huge, positive, explosive engine that can do a lot, but there's no steering wheel. Where is it going?
I like very much what you said, because we need to learn and we need to be practical. And I see the health system very conservative. They say this is Ministry of Interior, the most conservative health system, and the behavior of many doctors that, I mean, I understand from one side that for sure, for many conditions, you need to see in physical the patient, and we cannot reject the one in favor of the other. But we can do both, like we had distant learning, distance health, at least for the first point of entry, when we can save so much unnecessary visits, because many of the visits are unnecessary. When you go, and then I don't like to link this to saving of CO2, to climate change, etc. On many topics, especially on the more moderate light symptoms or something, we can do also distance health. But this is such a dramatic rejection by some providers, health providers, against this. No, we don't like to do this. Okay, in Germany it's because they like to write the invoice. But we can find a way to do, and in not only in Germany, but many places, you need to go there every week to the doctor, because then you have the blood test, and it's not possible to transfer this via telephone because it's GDPR, I don't know what. You need to go in 1 week later for the results. This is something which is nonsense. I mean, I'm so angry about it, because in Bulgaria, I called on the laboratory in the morning. come at my house, give me username and password, and I have at 2 o'clock in the afternoon all my results. I give my results via WhatsApp to my doctor, and that's it. This thing in few hours in Germany is 10 days. So there's so many practical issues, which I understand that the old fashion of dealing is that you need to write 2 times the invoice or 3 times or many times to ask the patient to come many times. But they can write the invoice in any case, even if it's distance health provided service. But we need to be much more practical and find the best way. For sure, for many conditions, you need to go to doctor. You need to do the examples. But for some smaller issues, maybe you can avoid this. Thank you.
Yes, actually, there are some comments and questions in the chat in this direction. At the end, what really should matter, we will prolong a few minutes because since we were a bit late starting this, and hopefully you stay a few minutes more. But at the end, it's important to know what are the needs, and starting from the needs, to adapt the entire system around the needs. And do we know really the patient needs, and does the pharmaceutical industry work enough on that? And there's a question in the chat, actually, is it time to redefine really this cooperation? And the concept of incentives is very nice, but how about transparency and accountability of the investments that society is doing in one or another way? And does it really meet the expectations and the needs of those who are waiting for innovation to come, or the innovation simply goes to the low-hanging fruits?
You want me to start?
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, I can start. So I think I think there are several. I don't think we understand the need enough, because the need is very much defined of the local system you're in. And what was mentioned by all of you before is also, I think we need to find a balance between what is local and what is not. Some of it is always going to be local, but not all of it has to be on that part. And just coming back to the mention before on fast access to lab results. I actually, living in Denmark, I have an app where it comes in automatically. But the expectation for me is also when I go to the doctor, I have the result on the app before I reach my car, which might be not be realistic to expect. So one thing is that, but transparency comes in so many ways. Trust of data can only come with transparency. It doesn't come with legal frames. It comes with transparency, and then the transparency might be in the legal frames as well. And how we work around those things. So I think I think we already now, for the readiness, we need to begin to think, what is it we need in 10 years, and what are the needs we can see? For instance, what was mentioned before on the 10 points that FP has been looking at, can we also look at that and try to see, okay, are these the challenges we expect in 10 years that we are trying to use to solve it in that part? And there we can then begin to apply to the readiness that we can work with.
Yes, about the future points and how we make sure that we are relevant to the future expectations of citizens and the needs of citizens.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and a communication challenge that this industry has always had, to communicate further than just the doctors and hospitals that it serves, and really explain better how an industry works. And I think to a certain extent, COVID helped, because suddenly there was an interest in vaccines. So at least people know how vaccines are developed. Hopefully a little bit also about how science works. So it's not because you decide there's an unmet need here and you put all the incentives in this area that you're going to find the solution there. Because if you think about the mRNA vaccine for COVID, it was being developed for cancer. Science is like that. And maybe I'm too much of a scientist, but scientist is not linear. It doesn't work like that. You're looking for one thing and you find lots of other things within it. And I think that's really important to take into consideration when there's a discussion on unmet medical need, that for many patients, unmet medical need is just not having the right treatment for them. they may have a treatment, but it's not giving them the quality of life that they need to be able to participate in life. And so I think unmet medical need is a really broad discussion, and it would be against patients' interests if we made it very narrow to say, if there's no treatment, that's an unmet medical need. There may be a treatment, and it makes no difference if the person has to stay lying down for the rest of their lives, or stuck in a hospital. I think that's important. At the same time, like you said, we learn more, and we get more and more knowledgeable. We develop certain therapy areas more than others because, again, science is like that. When you get more information about one therapy area, then suddenly that populates even more solutions. That's exciting. But incentives are really important to focus our attention in areas where it's much harder. And one of those areas is typically rare diseases. Rare diseases are 95% genetic based. They're never, they're comorbidities, they are chronic, they are life-threatening, they happen in children, tiny populations. They're like the extreme of everything. And so they are extremely difficult to even study, never mind to find solutions. And when we looked into when the revision of the orphan medicinal product legislation was proposed, we looked into why is it so hard, and we really discovered that there are also scientific obstacles. So not just small populations, and there's a price issue, and there's a location, how do you can make a clinical trial and comparators, but also the science. Like the science is impossible. And so as FPO, we're looking into a sort of moonshot initiative to help us look at the white spots, which are the ones where we're not looking at enough. And so there is a lot more done, and I'd like to loop back to data. If the objective is the patient, the result for the patient, which apparently in healthcare we call outcome, but I think its result is better. How can we understand from the patient what the outcome that he or she wants is? How can we track it with data? How can we communicate that data back so that we are all focused, everybody, the technology providers, the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, everybody is focused on getting that outcome for the patient, whatever his unmet need may be. And today we're not there. We couldn't even compare mortality data during COVID. I mean, it was a disaster. Even, never mind interoperability of systems. So hopefully digital has had a huge boost through COVID, not just online events, but health data. And we can really use the tools that we have much more efficiently to focus on finding solutions for everybody in the way that they need them. But I think a bit of